All right, diving into a dark world today, folks.
Oh.
Yeah, serial killers.
Always a crowd pleaser.
Well, and we're looking at this list of the so-called worst from each state.
Right.
And, it's morbid for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a reason
Oh, yeah.
true crime fascinates so many of us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're staring into this abyss of human behavior,
Right.
trying to understand what pushes someone to these extremes.
Totally. And,
Yeah.
The U.S., unfortunately,
Oh, yeah.
provides a lot of case studies. We actually lead the world in serial killings.
That's a disturbing fact.
It is.
So this article we're looking at, it uses the term worst.
Right.
But that's obviously subjective.
Of course.
So we'll be focusing on cases that are particularly impactful or revealing,
I like that.
not just body count.
Yeah. Some cases really highlight terrifying patterns or expose these societal blind spots that allowed these predators to operate for so long.
Like Samuel Little.
Oh, yeah.
This guy confessed to 93 victims, was active for decades.
It's unbelievable.
How on earth did he fly under the radar for so long?
Little's case is such a prime example of how vulnerability can tragically become a target.
Mm-hmm.
His victims were often marginalized women, struggling with addiction, involved in sex work, and sadly, their disappearances, less likely to be reported, let alone thoroughly investigated.
It's awful.
It's a chilling example of how societal biases can have life or death consequences.
Makes you realize how the most vulnerable among us can become almost invisible to the systems that should be protecting them.
Right.
And we see this pattern again and again with serial killers.
Absolutely.
But sometimes the setting itself becomes part of the horror.
Oh, yeah.
Take Robert Hansen, the butcher baker up in Alaska.
Yeah.
He used the vast Alaskan wilderness as his hunting ground.
Oh, my gosh. Just imagine being hunted by a man through that unforgiving wilderness.
I can't.
He would kidnap women, release them into this vast and isolated landscape, and then hunt them down.
Ugh, it's just...
For sport.
It adds a whole other layer of terror.
It does.
His crimes, and it speaks to a deeply disturbed psychology, need for control.
Right.
Taken to a horrifying extreme.
Absolutely.
Speaking of psychology, let's talk about John Wayne Gacy.
Oh, the killer clown.
The killer clown. This case is seared into our collective memory for a reason.
Yes.
The image of all those bodies found under his house. It's just pure nightmare fuel.
It's the stuff of nightmares.
So what's so fascinating about Gacy is the duality of his persona.
Right.
He was a respected community member, active in local politics, even performed as a clown at children's parties.
And yet capable of such brutality.
Ugh. I know, and the killer clown image has become like an archetype.
Oh, yeah.
Almost a symbol of the darkness that can lurk beneath a seemingly normal facade.
100%.
It plays into our deepest fears, right?
Yeah.
That someone we trust, someone who seems friendly and approachable, could be capable of these monstrous acts.
It's scary.
And that brings us to perhaps the most infamous example of this.
Okay.
Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
He operated across multiple states, but he was ultimately executed in Florida.
Right.
And what always gets me is how he used his charm as a weapon.
Bundy's case really forced law enforcement to rethink their approach to serial killers.
Right.
Before Bundy.
Yeah.
The common perception was that these individuals were loners.
Right.
Social misfits.
The quiet guy.
But Bundy was charismatic, handsome, and articulate. He used those qualities to gain the trust of his victims.
Yeah.
Often luring them in with pleas for help.
Wow.
It shattered the myth of the creepy stranger.
Yeah.
And highlighted the very real danger of manipulation and deception.
It's a terrifying thought.
It is.
That someone so seemingly normal could harbor such darkness. Bundy's case also led to this development of criminal profiling.
Oh, yeah.
As investigators tried to understand how someone like him could operate undetected for so long.
Right. They need to get inside the minds of these predators, understand their motivations, and predict their behavior.
Right.
This led to the creation of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit.
Wow.
Which revolutionized the way we investigate serial crimes.
But even with these advancements, it often seems like these killers exploit society's blind spots. Like the Green River killer, Gary Ridgway, who preyed on vulnerable women in the Seattle area for years.
Ridgway's case, like so many others, it shines a light on these systemic issues that make certain groups more susceptible to becoming victims. He targeted women on the margins of society runaways, sex workers, those struggling with addiction.
Right.
Their disappearances often went unnoticed, and the investigation was hampered by a lack of resources.
Of course.
And, frankly, societal will to prioritize these cases.
So it's not just about catching these individuals after the fact.
No.
It's about recognizing the systemic failures that create the conditions for them to operate in the first place.
100%. And it raises the question, how do we as a society address those underlying issues to create a safer environment for everyone?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But sometimes the individual cases are just so bizarre they almost defy comprehension.
Oh, yeah.
Like Rodney Alcala, the dating game killer.
Oh, my God.
The fact that this guy appeared on a dating show
I know.
while actively committing murders is mind-boggling.
Alcala's case takes deception to a whole other level.
I know. It's like a macabre performance.
It is.
A mockery of social norms.
Absolutely.
The fact that he could charm his way onto a televised dating show while simultaneously engaging in these horrific acts of violence
Unbelievable.
speaks volumes about his manipulative abilities and the dangers of judging someone solely on their outward appearance.
You can't judge a book by its cover.
Talk about appearances being deceiving.
Seriously.
And for a final case that'll stick with you.
Okay.
There's David Parker Ray, the toy box killer.
Oh, gosh.
This guy outfitted a trailer specifically for torture. It doesn't get much darker than that.
Ray's case is particularly disturbing.
Yeah.
Because he died before facing trial.
Oh, wow.
So the full extent of his crimes may never be known.
So we're left with this horrifying glimpse into a world of depravity.
Yeah.
But without the closure of a trial or the possibility of justice being served, it's a chilling reminder that there are depths of human cruelty that are difficult to comprehend.
It is.
But as we delve deeper into these cases, we'll try to unpack the psychology behind them and explore what, if anything, we can learn from these dark chapters in human history.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unsettling to think that someone like Ray could operate undetected for so long.
It really is.
Raises questions about the role of society, how we can be more aware, more vigilant in recognizing those potential warning signs.
That's what I find so fascinating about this topic.
Yeah.
It's not just about the gruesome details. It's about understanding the psychology, the societal factors, the missed opportunities that allow these tragedies to happen.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's a complex interplay of nature and nurture. You know, a lot of experts believe that certain psychological traits, like antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy, can predispose individuals to violence.
So it's not as simple as just being born evil.
Not at all.
Okay.
Childhood trauma, abuse, neglect.
Yeah.
These are often recurring themes in the backgrounds of serial killers.
Wow.
It's like these early experiences create a kind of blueprint for violence.
Yeah.
A distorted worldview that makes these horrific acts seem,
right,
in their minds, justifiable or even necessary.
Okay, so let's unpack this idea of criminal profiling a bit further.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier when we were talking about Ted Bundy. How exactly does that work, and how has it helped law enforcement?
Well, criminal profiling is essentially an attempt to understand the motivations and behavioral patterns of an unknown offender based on the evidence left at the crime scene.
So you're using all of that?
Yeah, it's like putting together a puzzle.
Okay.
Using every little detail to create a psychological portrait of the perpetrator.
To predict, maybe?
Exactly. It can help investigators predict future actions, narrow down potential suspects,
got it,
and ultimately bring these individuals to justice.
So it's like a real-life version of those crime shows where they analyze every little detail
100%
to catch the bad guy.
But it's important to remember that profiling is not foolproof.
Of course.
It's a tool.
Yeah.
A valuable one.
Right.
But not a magic bullet.
Got it.
And it's constantly evolving as we learn more about this complex psychology.
So speaking of evolving, the article talks about how law enforcement has had to adapt its methods over time in response to these increasingly complex and horrific crimes.
The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, for instance, was formed in response to the rise of serial killings in the 1970s.
Wow.
They brought together psychologists, criminologists, investigators to develop new techniques for understanding and apprehending these predators.
It's like a constant game of cat and mouse.
In a sense, yes.
With both sides trying to outsmart the other.
The ultimate goal is not just to catch these individuals.
Right.
It's to prevent these crimes from happening in the first place.
Right. And that requires a much broader approach.
It does.
And we keep coming back to this idea of societal vulnerability.
Yeah.
It seems like so many of these killers specifically target those who are marginalized or overlooked by society.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
You know, if we look at the victims of serial killers, there's a disproportionate representation of marginalized groups.
Right.
Sex workers, runaway teens, those struggling with addiction, the homeless.
Right.
These individuals are often living on the fringes of society. Their disappearances less likely to be noticed or investigated with the same urgency.
It's heartbreaking. Really, it's like they're victimized twice.
Yeah.
First by the circumstances that make them vulnerable, and then again by the predator who exploits that vulnerability.
It's a tragic reality.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the need for systemic change, for addressing the root causes of this vulnerability.
Like what?
Poverty, lack of access to resources, mental health support, and so on.
So prevention isn't just about law enforcement then.
No.
It's about creating a more equitable and just society where everyone has a safety net.
Precisely. It's about building communities where people feel supported and valued, where they have access to the resources they need to thrive, and where they're not left vulnerable to those who would prey on their desperation.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
But I can't help but wonder, knowing all of this, how do we as individuals make a difference? It feels like such a huge and complex problem.
I understand that feeling.
Yeah.
But there are things we can do.
Okay.
First and foremost, we need to be aware.
Right.
Educate yourself about the signs of abuse, neglect, and exploitation.
Got it.
Support organizations that work with at-risk communities.
Okay.
Advocate for policies that address social inequalities.
Yeah.
Even small actions can have a ripple effect.
So it sounds like you're saying that we can't afford to be passive bystanders.
Absolutely.
We have to actively engage.
Be vigilant.
Yeah.
Use our voices to advocate for change.
We all have a role to play in creating a safer and more just world.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. It's a lot to process, but I think that's the biggest takeaway for me from all of this.
What's that?
You can't just compartmentalize these cases, you know, as these like isolated incidents perpetrated by monsters.
Yeah, you're hitting on a crucial point there.
I mean, they're monstrous acts, no doubt.
Of course.
Yeah.
But understanding the complex interplay of, you know, the individual psychology and societal factors is key to prevention.
It's about recognizing the humanity of both the victims and the perpetrators, however difficult that may be.
Absolutely.
Right, we can't just dehumanize them and dismiss it as pure evil.
Right.
Because that doesn't help anyone.
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't bring back the victims, and it certainly doesn't prevent future tragedies.
Exactly. It's about having these difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Acknowledging these uncomfortable truths about our society. And, you know, being willing to challenge our own biases.
And it's about remembering the victims, not just as statistics or case files, but as real people.
Absolutely.
With families, dreams, and lives cut tragically short.
Their stories deserve to be heard and their memories honored. And the best way to do that is to learn from these tragedies and work towards a future where they're less likely to occur.
So for our listeners who are now probably feeling a mix of fascination and deep unease,
understand.
What are some resources they can turn to if they want to explore these topics further?
Well, there's a wealth of information out there.
Yeah.
For those who want to delve deeper.
Okay.
The FBI's website has a whole section dedicated to serial crimes.
Okay.
With detailed case studies and insights into their investigative methods.
That's a great starting point.
Yeah.
What about for those who want to learn more about the psychology behind these crimes?
Books like Mindhunter by John Douglas offer a fascinating glimpse into the minds of serial killers.
Right.
While The Anatomy of Motive explores the complex interplay of psychological and social factors that contribute to violent behavior.
And for those who want to help to be part of the solution.
Supporting organizations like the National Center for Victims of Crime is a tangible way to make a difference. They provide resources and advocacy for those affected by violence and work tirelessly to prevent future tragedies.
I think it's important to reiterate that point.
What's that?
We can't just be passive consumers of true crime. We have a responsibility to engage, to learn, and to use that knowledge to create a safer world.
Couldn't agree more. It's not about glorifying violence or sensationalizing these crimes,
right,
but about using them as a lens to examine ourselves, our society, and our shared responsibility to protect the most vulnerable among us.
Well said. This deep dive has definitely been a journey into the darkest corners of humanity.
It has.
But it's also sparked a lot of important questions and a renewed sense of purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this exploration. And remember, knowledge is power.
Use it wisely.
Use it wisely. Use it compassionately.
Yes.
And let's work together to build a brighter future.